A dying king, a slave with a secret, and a bag of gold that changed everything. What she did next, no one saw coming. Watch until the end, because this story may just stay with you forever. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and why you love these emotional medieval stories. The bitter winter winds howled through the stone corridors of Castle Ardil, carrying with them the unmistakable scent of death. King Petru Dragoș, once the most powerful ruler in all of Romania, now lay withered and pale against silken pillows, his once commanding frame reduced to little more than skin stretched over brittle bones. His eyes, however, retained a fierce intensity, windows to a soul tormented by decades of regret. "Your Majesty, please," begged the royal physician, a gray-haired man, whose hands trembled as he mixed yet another useless remedy. "You must conserve your strength." But the king waved him away with a bony hand adorned with the royal signet ring that now hung loose around his finger. His mind, though sharp with fever, kept returning to that summer day 38 years ago, to the beautiful peasant woman with eyes like forest pools, to promises whispered and broken, to a child he'd never held. "Bring me the girl," he rasped, his voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "Bring me Irina." The chamberlain exchanged worried glances with the physician, but nodded solemnly. Minutes later, the heavy oak door creaked open once more. Irina entered the royal bedchamber with her eyes downcast, as befitted her station. At 36, her beauty had not diminished with the years of servitude. If anything, hardship had refined it, carving her high cheekbones into elegant lines, turning her quiet dignity into an almost regal bearing. Her chestnut hair, streaked with a few strands of silver, was neatly braided and hidden beneath a simple linen head covering. Despite the crude servant's garb that hung from her slender frame, there was something in her posture that could not be broken, a hidden strength that had survived 15 years of slavery within these very walls. "Leave us," the king commanded, and the attendants shuffled out, casting curious glances behind them. What could the dying monarch want with a mere slave woman? When they were alone, Petru struggled to sit upright, beckoning Irina closer with a trembling hand. She approached cautiously, her gaze still lowered respectfully. "Look at me," he commanded, the authority in his voice momentarily returning. Irina raised her eyes, dark, depthless eyes that had witnessed countless sorrows yet somehow retained a flicker of defiance. The king gasped softly, for in that moment, he saw not the slave, but a glimpse of the woman she might have been, had fate dealt her a different hand. "Do you know why I've summoned you?" he asked, his breathing labored. "No, Your Majesty," she replied, her voice surprisingly melodious despite its controlled neutrality. The king laughed bitterly, the sound dissolving into a fit of coughing that stained his lips crimson. "Of course not. Why would you? We've barely exchanged 10 words in all these years you've served in my household." He paused, his rheumy eyes searching her face. "Yet you've heard things, haven't you? Servants always do." A flicker of alarm passed across Irina's features before she masterfully concealed it. "I attend to my duties, sire, nothing more." "Lies," he said, but without anger. "Necessary lies that have kept you alive." With great effort, the king reached beneath his pillow and withdrew a small leather pouch that clinked heavily as he moved it. "I am dying, Irina. By this time tomorrow, I will be nothing but a cold corpse, and this kingdom I have both loved and failed, will fall into unworthy hands." He thrust the pouch toward her. "Take it." Irina hesitated, then cautiously accepted the offering. The weight of it surprised her. It was heavier than expected. "Open it," he commanded. With careful fingers, she loosened the drawstring and gasped. Inside gleamed more gold coins than she had ever seen in her life, a fortune that could purchase freedom for 100 slaves. 100 gold pieces, the king whispered. Enough to buy passage far from Romania, enough to start anew somewhere no one knows your name or your past. Irina stared at the treasure in her hands, her mind reeling with possibilities that had never before seemed within reach. "Why?" she finally managed, her voice barely audible. The king's eyes clouded with pain that was not entirely physical. "Because before I meet my maker, I must attempt one act of redemption." His voice dropped even lower. And because you, of all people in this castle, might understand what it means to love someone enough to sacrifice everything. Confusion flickered across Irina's face, but the king continued before she could speak. They will come for my crown before my body is cold. The Duke Nikolai Corbea has been waiting for this moment for years. His breathing grew more labored with each word. You must go, now, tonight. He gripped her wrist with surprising strength. Corey, he commanded in a hoarse whisper. Run. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, a flicker of understanding that transcended their stations. Then the king released her and sank back against his pillows, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. Go, he whispered, turning his face away. You are free. Irina backed away slowly, the pouch of gold clutched tightly against her chest. The guards outside the door barely glanced at her as she hurried past, assuming she had merely performed some menial service for their dying master. Word spread quickly through the castle that night. The slave girl Irina had been given gold and told to flee. Servants whispered in darkened corners, noble ladies gossiped behind painted fans, and guards exchanged knowing smirks. All expected her to vanish before dawn, to seize this unexpected chance at freedom. But in her small chamber in the servants' quarters, Irina sat motionless on her narrow bed, the gold coins spread before her on the rough woolen blanket. Her fingers traced the profile of the king stamped into each piece, her mind not on escape, but on fragments of conversations overheard through the years, whispers of a royal bastard, a hidden heir, a mother who still lived and mourned. Outside her small window, snow began to fall, coating the kingdom in pristine white. By morning, it would cover her tracks. With deliberate movements, Irina gathered her few possessions: a wooden comb, a small knife, an extra dress, a faded cloak. She wrapped the coins carefully and secured them inside her garments, close to her skin. As the first gray light of dawn crept across the horizon, Irina slipped through the castle's servants' entrance. But unlike what everyone expected, she did not head toward the distant ports or foreign lands where freedom awaited. Instead, she turned north, toward the rugged mountains, where a small village named Runk nestled in the valley, and where, if the whispers were true, lived a man with royal blood who knew nothing of his birthright. Behind her, the castle towers loomed dark against the lightening sky, and within its walls a king drew his final breaths, his rheumy eyes fixed on a future he would never see. Dawn broke with a hesitant glow over the frost-bitten landscape as Irina made her way through the treacherous mountain paths of Transylvania. The forest loomed around her like sentinels, ancient pines standing watch as she navigated the muddy trails that had partially frozen in the night's bitter cold. Her breath formed clouds in the frigid air, and she pulled her worn cloak tighter, the golden coins sewn into its hidden pocket weighing heavily against her side. For a woman who had rarely left the castle walls in 15 years, the vastness of the wilderness was both terrifying and exhilarating. Each snapping twig made her heart race, every distant wolf howl sent a shiver down her spine. But still she pressed on, driven by purpose stronger than fear. By midday, she reached a crossroads where a weathered shrine to the Virgin Mary stood sentinel. Irina paused, removing a small crust of bread from her provisions. Though hunger gnawed at her stomach, she placed the bread as an offering, then knelt in the snow. "Guide me," she whispered, her words forming misty plumes. "Give me strength to fulfill this mission." As she rose, an old woman approached, hunched under a bundle of kindling. Her face was a map of wrinkles, eyes sharp despite her advanced years. "Dangerous times for a woman to travel alone," the crone observed, studying Irina with unconcealed curiosity. "Especially one with your bearing. You're no common peasant, despite those clothes." Irina tensed. "I'm simply a servant on an errand for my master." The old woman's laugh was like dry leaves rustling. "Servants don't carry themselves like queens, child. Where are you bound?" Something in the woman's direct gaze loosened Irina's caution. "Runk," she admitted. "I seek the village of Runk." "Ah." The crone nodded knowingly. "The blacksmith's village. Follow the river north until you reach the split oak struck by lightning. then east for half a day's journey. She squinted at Irina. What business takes you to that forgotten place? Family matters, Irina replied, the lie sitting uncomfortably on her tongue. The old woman studied her face. Be careful of what you seek in Runk. Some secrets are buried for good reason. With that cryptic warning, she shuffled past, leaving Irina staring after her with unease settling in her stomach. As Irina continued her journey, memories surfaced unbidden. Fragments of whispered conversations overheard while scrubbing floors or serving meals. The noble ladies thought servants deaf and blind to their gossip. The peasant woman, Lydia, they had whispered behind jeweled hands, the one who caught the king's eye during the summer hunt of '87. They say she bore him a son, strong and handsome as his father once was. And what became of this bastard? Another had asked. Hidden away. The queen was still alive then, and vengeful. The king paid the woman to disappear, to take the child and never speak of its parentage. Night fell quickly in the mountains. Irina found shelter in an abandoned shepherd's hut, its roof half collapsed but still offering protection from the biting wind. As she huddled by the small fire she'd managed to build, she withdrew 1 gold coin from her hidden pouch, turning it in the firelight. The profile stamped upon it, King Petru in his younger days, strong-jawed and proud, bore a striking resemblance to the blacksmith she had glimpsed once, years ago, when he had delivered ornate ironwork to the castle. She hadn't known who he was then, only that something about his bearing had caught her attention. Now she understood why. Sleep came fitfully that night, dreams filled with royal crowns falling into abysses and a faceless man hammering at a forge that glowed with unnatural blue flame. Morning brought heavy snowfall. Irina trudged onward, her legs aching from the unaccustomed exertion. By late afternoon, smoke from chimneys appeared in the distance. The village of Runk nestled in a narrow valley, protected from the worst of winter's fury by the surrounding mountains. Irina paused at the village boundary, suddenly overwhelmed by doubt. What was she doing? She was no diplomat, no royal messenger. She was a slave, or had been until the king's gift of freedom and gold. What right had she to upend this man's life with truths he might not wish to hear? Are you lost, mistress? A child's voice startled her from her thoughts. A small girl with braided blonde hair stood watching her curiously, a wooden pail clutched in her mittened hands. No, Irina smiled, gathering her resolve. Not lost. I seek the blacksmith, Andrei Vlad. Can you direct me to him? The girl nodded eagerly. Everyone knows Master Vlad. His forge is by the large oak at the village center. You can't miss it. It's the only place where flowers still grow even in winter. Flowers? In this cold? Master Vlad's mother plants them, the girl explained, skipping alongside Irina as she entered the village. Strange herbs and blooms from far away. Some say she's a witch, but father says she's just a woman who knows the old ways. She was very beautiful once before the sickness. Irina's heart quickened. This sickness, has she had it long? As long as I can remember, the girl replied. Master Vlad worked so hard to buy medicines for her. That's why his hands are so strong, from working twice as much as any other man. Her voice held unmistakable admiration. They rounded a bend in the village's main path, and suddenly Irina saw it. The forge, larger than the surrounding cottages, with a constant plume of smoke rising from its stone chimney. And beside it, a small cottage with indeed window boxes containing green shoots despite the snow piled around them. There! The girl pointed proudly. That's Master Vlad's place. As if summoned by her words, the door of the forge swung open, and he emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples, his face bearing the strong bones and proud nose that marked him, unmistakably, as Petru Dragoș's son. Irina felt her breath catch in her throat. Even from this distance, the resemblance was undeniable. The blacksmith looked up, sensing their presence, his gaze piercing even across the distance, locked with Irina's. For one frozen moment, past and future seemed to collide in that silent exchange. Then he frowned, turning away to call something to someone inside the forge. The spell broken, Irina whispered her thanks to the child and squared her shoulders. The path ahead was clear now, though fraught with danger and uncertainty. But for the first time in her life, Irina was guided not by the commands of others, but by her own will, her own purpose. With steady steps, she walked toward the forge and the man who, unknowingly, held the fate of a kingdom in his calloused hands. The forge radiated heat that pushed back the winter's chill, creating a pocket of warmth that enveloped Irina as she approached. The rhythmic clanging of metal against metal filled the air, a heartbeat of creation amid the sleeping village. She paused at the threshold, suddenly uncertain, watching as Andrei Vlad brought his hammer down upon glowing metal with precise, powerful strokes. He worked with the focus of a man accustomed to solitude, seemingly unaware of her presence. His profile, illuminated by the orange glow of the forge, was sharp and defined, the strong jawline, the proud nose, the intense concentration in his eyes all echoing the features of the dying king. But where Petru's face had been lined with cruelty and regret, Andrei's bore the marks of honest labor and quiet dignity. A young apprentice boy noticed her first, tugging at his master's sleeve and pointing. Andrei looked up, wiping sweat from his brow with a forearm, leaving a smudge of soot across his sun-bronzed skin. "Can I help you?" His voice was deep, tinged with the local accent, but carrying undertones of natural authority that no commoner's upbringing could instill. Irina stepped forward, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Master Vlad, I seek a moment of your time on a matter of some importance." He regarded her with suspicion, eyes narrowing slightly. "And who might you be? You're not from Runk." It wasn't a question, but an observation. "My name is Irina." She hesitated. "I've traveled from Castle Ardil." At the mention of the castle, something flickered across Andrei's face, a momentary tension that he quickly masked. "The royal castle? What business would anyone from there have with a village blacksmith?" The apprentice boy's eyes widened with curiosity, and Andrei turned to him with gentle firmness. "Mihail, take these finished pieces to Master Koyokaru and tell him they'll be ready for mounting tomorrow. Then you may go home for the evening." The boy looked disappointed to miss whatever conversation might follow, but nodded obediently. "Yes, Master Vlad." He gathered several intricately worked metal pieces and scurried out, casting one last curious glance at Irina. When they were alone, Andrei set down his hammer and crossed his arms, his stance wary. "Now speak plainly. What brings a castle servant? For that is what you are by your manner, despite your attempt to disguise it, all the way to Runk in the dead of winter." Irina took a deep breath. "I bring news that concerns you deeply, but it is not for open ears." She glanced meaningfully at the open doorway. With a reluctant nod, Andrei gestured for her to follow him deeper into the forge, to a small side room where finished pieces awaited collection. Iron chandeliers, elegant door hinges, and decorative metalwork lined the walls, each piece revealing not just skill, but artistry. "You have a gift," Irina observed softly, running her fingers over an iron branch with delicate leaves so realistic they seemed to rustle. "I didn't invite you here for flattery," he replied gruffly, though a flicker of pride crossed his features. "What is this urgent news?" Irina met his gaze directly. "King Petru Dragosh lies dying at Castle Ardil. By now he may already be dead." Andrei's expression remained impassive. "And what is that to me? The affairs of kings are far removed from the concerns of Runk." "Are they?" Irina challenged softly. "Even when the king in question is your father?" The words hung in the air between them, heavy as anvils. Andrei's face drained of color before flooding with angry crimson. "Get out," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Whatever game you're playing ends now." "This is no game," Irina insisted, standing her ground despite the intimidating fury building in his eyes. "You are Petru Dragosh's son, born to Lydia of Runk 38 years ago, after the summer hunt when—" "Enough!" Andrei slammed his palm against the workbench, sending tools clattering to the floor. "How dare you come here with such lies? My father was Konstantin Vlad, a carpenter who died honorably defending this village from raiders when I was 10 years old." Irina's voice remained calm despite her racing heart. "The man who raised you was honorable indeed, but he was not your blood father. Look at your reflection, Andrei Vlad. Look at this." She withdrew one of the gold coins bearing King Petru's profile. "Tell me you don't see yourself in these features." Andre knocked the coin from her hand, sending it spinning across the floor. "My mother is a respectable widow who has suffered enough without strangers bringing such slander to our doorstep. I want you gone from Runk by nightfall." "Your mother knows the truth," Irina pressed on, desperation entering her voice. "Ask her about the summer of 1387. Ask her about the blue cloak lined with silver thread that the king gifted her, which she later sold to pay for medicines when you were ill as a child." That detail, something Irina had overheard years ago from an old chambermaid gossiping about the king's youthful indiscretions, struck home. Andre froze, uncertainty flickering across his features. "How could you know about that cloak?" he whispered. "Because the king's conscience troubled him in his final days," Irina replied, softening her tone. "Because before I left the castle, he entrusted me with gold and a mission." She knelt to retrieve the coin, holding it out to him once more. "Look at it, Andre. Truly look." With reluctant fingers he took the coin, studying the profile stamped upon it. For several long moments he stared at it, his expression unreadable. Then abruptly he handed it back to her. "Whatever resemblance you imagine means nothing. I am a blacksmith, not a lost prince from some courtly tale." His voice was bitter. "Even if what you say were true, which I do not for a moment believe, why would the king send a servant on such an errand? Why not a royal messenger, a nobleman?" "Because the court is riddled with corruption," Irina explained. "Because Duke Nikolai Corbeia has positioned himself to seize power upon the king's death, and anyone known to carry such a message would never have reached you alive." Andre laughed without humor. "And you expect me to believe that you, a woman alone, traveled through winter mountains carrying royal secrets and a fortune in gold, all to find a bastard son the king never acknowledged?" "I expect nothing," Irina responded with quiet dignity. "I fulfill a promise to a dying man who sought too late to right his wrongs." Something in her tone gave him pause. He studied her face with new intensity. "You speak as if you knew him well." "I served in his household for 15 years, she replied. "I knew his cruelties and his rare kindnesses. I knew the weight of his regrets at the end." From outside, the sound of approaching voices broke the tension. Andre glanced toward the door, then back at Irina. "This conversation is over. For your own safety, I suggest you find lodging at the village inn and leave tomorrow with the morning traders heading to Brasov." He turned away, clearly dismissing her, but Irina's voice stopped him at the doorway. "Your mother is ill," she said softly. "Has been for years. The medicines cost more than a blacksmith can easily earn, no matter how talented. Did you never wonder why a simple carpenter's widow would need such expensive treatments?" Andre's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't turn around. "What are you implying?" "Royal blood carries royal maladies," Irina replied. "The same illness that claimed Queen Elena now weakens your mother, a rare condition that runs in the Dragosh bloodline." She saw the impact of her words in the rigid set of his spine, the way his hands clenched at his sides. Without another word, he strode out of the forge, leaving Irina alone among the beautiful metalwork that had earned him a reputation far beyond Runk, a testament to the artistic sensibility he had inherited not from a village carpenter, but from the royal line known for its patronage of the arts. Irina gathered her cloak around her shoulders, wondering if she had pushed too hard, too fast. But time was a luxury they didn't have. Even now, Duke Corbeia might be consolidating his power, eliminating threats, rewriting the future of Ardeal in blood. As she stepped outside, the winter sun was setting, painting the snow-covered village in hues of gold and crimson. In the distance, she could see Andre's broad shoulders as he strode purposefully toward a small cottage where, despite the bitter cold, green shoots poked through the snow in carefully tended window boxes. The confrontation with Lydia would not be easy for him, but it was necessary, and Irina would be waiting when he was ready to hear the rest of the truth. 3 days passed with no word from Andre. Irina had taken a small room at the village inn, a modest establishment with rough-hewn beams and perpetually smoky air. The innkeeper's wife, a plump, cheerful woman named Dorina, had asked few questions about the mysterious woman traveling alone, seeming content with Irina's vague explanation of visiting distant relatives. On the morning of the fourth day, as weak winter sunlight streamed through the frosted window, a firm knock sounded at Irina's door. She opened it to find Andrei standing there, his face haggard and drawn, as if he hadn't slept in days. The proud posture she had first observed was diminished, his broad shoulders slightly stooped under an invisible weight. "Walk with me," he said without preamble. Not a request, but not quite a command either. They walked in silence through the awakening village, past cottages where morning fires sent smoke spiraling into the crystalline air. Irina matched her steps to his longer stride, waiting, sensing that whatever had transpired between mother and son had shaken him to his core. Finally, they reached the edge of the forest where a path led to a small clearing. A frozen stream glittered in the morning light, and Andrei stopped beside it, staring at the ice as if it might hold answers. "She confirmed it," he said at last, his breath clouding in the frigid air. "All of it." Irina remained silent, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "She met him during the summer hunt of 1387, Andrei went on, his voice flat. "She was 16, gathering herbs in the forest. He was 25, newly crowned, separated from his hunting party." A bitter smile twisted his lips. "She said he was charming, that he spoke to her as an equal, not as a king to a peasant. That he returned to her many times that summer. He picked up a stone and hurled it at the frozen stream, where it skidded across the ice before coming to rest. When she discovered she was with child, she went to him, believing his promises of protection. Instead, he gave her gold and that damned blue cloak you mentioned, and told her to disappear, to never speak of their connection." His jaw tightened. "The queen was vindictive," he said. "She would harm the child." "The queen was indeed known for her cruelty," Irina confirmed softly, "especially toward anyone she perceived as a threat." Andrei turned to her suddenly, his eyes fierce. "Why did you come here? What does the king want after all these years of silence? Did his conscience suddenly awaken on his deathbed?" "In part," Irina acknowledged, "but there is more. The kingdom stands at a precipice. Duke Nikolai Corbeia has been positioning himself to seize power for years. With the king dead and no acknowledged heir—" "That is hardly my concern," Andrei interrupted harshly. "I'm a blacksmith, not a politician. I have no interest in court intrigues or power struggles." "And yet your blood gives you a claim to the throne that supersedes the duke's ambitions," Irina pressed. "A claim that many would support, especially those who fear Corbeia's tyranny." "A claim?" Andrei laughed bitterly. "A bastard son, unacknowledged for 38 years, raised as a commoner? What court would accept such a claim?" "The king left proof of your legitimacy," Irina said, reaching into her cloak to withdraw a sealed parchment bearing the royal signet. "This document, signed in his own hand and witnessed by the royal confessor, acknowledges you as his son and rightful heir." Andrei stared at the parchment as if it might bite him. "I want nothing from him," he said, though his voice wavered slightly. "Not his gold, not his crown, not his kingdom." "What of your mother?" Irina asked gently. "The treatments she requires will only become more expensive as her condition progresses. Royal physicians might—" "Do not use her illness to manipulate me," Andrei snarled, his composure cracking. "My father, Konstantin Vlad, the only father I have ever known, taught me that a man makes his own way in this world. That honor and honest work are worth more than titles and gold." "Noble sentiments," Irina agreed. "But there is honor, too, in protecting the innocent. The people of Ardil will suffer under Corbeia's rule. He taxes the poor into starvation to fund his lavish lifestyle. He imprisons those who speak against him. Women go missing from villages under his jurisdiction, never to be seen again." Something flickered in Andrei's eyes at this, a flash of protective rage quickly suppressed. Irina sensed she had struck a chord and pressed her advantage. "Your father, yes, Petru Dragoș, was not a good man in many ways, but he maintained a certain balance. The common people were not crushed underfoot. They could live, work, raise families in relative peace." She stepped closer. "That peace will vanish under Corbeia." Andrei turned away, staring into the forest depths. You speak as if I could simply walk into the castle and claim the throne. Even with that document, who would follow a blacksmith from Runk against a powerful duke with armies at his command? More than you might think, Irina replied. There are nobles who despise Corbeia, who would rally to a true Dragosh. The captain of the royal guard, Bogdan Lupescu, was loyal to your father and detests the duke. The Merchants' Guild has suffered under Corbeia's extortion and would fund a challenge to his power. And you know all this how? A servant? Andrei's skepticism was evident. Irina met his gaze steadily. Servants hear everything, see everything. We are invisible to those in power. They speak freely before us, as if we were merely furniture. I have spent 15 years learning the true nature of court politics from the shadows. A flicker of respect crossed Andrei's features before he shook his head. Even if what you say is true, I am no leader of men. I forge metal, not alliances. You underestimate yourself, Irina said. I've observed you these past days. The villagers respect you. The children look up to you. Even the village elder defers to your judgment in disputes. She gestured toward the village. That is leadership, Andrei. That is the natural authority that flows in your blood, whether you acknowledge its source or not. Andrei fell silent, his internal struggle evident in the conflicting emotions that crossed his face. My mother wants me to go, he admitted finally, his voice low. She believes it is my destiny. He spoke the word with distaste. She has carried the secret all these years, hoping to protect me. Now she sees it as the answer to her prayers, a chance for her son to claim his birthright. And what do you want, Andrei Vlad? Irina asked quietly. He looked at her with eyes that suddenly seemed older, wearier. I want what I have always wanted. A simple life, honest work, peace. He sighed heavily. But if what you say about Corbeia is true, if innocent people will suffer because I turn my back on this unwanted inheritance. The unfinished thought hung between them. Irina waited, knowing that this decision must be his alone. I need time, he said finally. Time to think, to speak with my mother again. He glanced toward the village. And I must make arrangements for her care if I... He couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence. Of course, Irina nodded. But we cannot delay long. News travels even in winter. If Corbeia learns of your existence before we are prepared... I understand the urgency, Andrei said grimly. Give me until tomorrow. I will have my answer then. As they walked back toward the village, Irina noticed a new awareness in Andrei. The way his eyes scanned the tree line, the protective stance he adopted when they passed other villagers. Already the weight of royal blood was changing him, making him conscious of dangers he had never before needed to consider. That night, alone in her room at the inn, Irina stood by the small window, watching snow fall gently over the sleeping village. In the distance, light still burned in the small cottage where Andrei and his mother were undoubtedly engaged in the most difficult conversation of their lives. She touched the pouch of gold coins hidden beneath her garments, wondering if she had done the right thing by coming here, by disrupting the peaceful existence of this man who had never asked for the burden she now placed upon his shoulders. But then she remembered the cruelties she had witnessed at court, the suffering that would surely multiply under Corbeia's unchecked rule, and she knew she had no choice. The kingdom needed its rightful heir, whether he wanted the crown or not. And perhaps in time, Andrei would come to see that his destiny had always been greater than a village forge, no matter how skilled his hands or honest his heart. Dawn broke with a sky the color of bruised plums, heavy snow clouds gathering on the horizon as Irina waited by the village well. The promised morning had arrived, and with it the moment of Andrei's decision. She pulled her cloak tighter against the biting wind, watching as early risers emerged from their cottages to begin the day's work. The approach of heavy footsteps drew her attention. Andrei appeared, leading a sturdy mountain pony laden with provisions. His face was set in grim determination, the boyish blacksmith now replaced by a man who had aged years in a single night. "You've decided," Irina said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Andrei's voice was low but firm. "I go with you, not for the crown, not for power, but for my mother and the people who would suffer under Corbeia's rule." Relief washed through Irina, though she kept her expression neutral. Your mother? I've made arrangements. Theodore the herbalist will stay with her. He's a good man who has been sweet on her for years. A faint smile softened Andrei's stern features. Perhaps it's time she allowed someone else to care for her. He paused, clearly wrestling with something else. There's more. Last night she gave me this. From inside his thick winter coat, he withdrew a tarnished silver medallion bearing the royal crest. She said, the king gave it to her as a token for the child, that he made her swear to keep it hidden until I was ready to claim my birthright. Irina's breath caught. The medallion was unmistakably the king's personal symbol, given only to those of royal blood. This is significant, Andrei. It proves your lineage beyond question. It proves only that he seduced a young girl and then abandoned her, Andrei countered, though he tucked the medallion carefully away. But if it helps protect the innocent from Corbea's tyranny, I'll use it. As they prepared to depart, villagers began to gather, whispers spreading quickly about the blacksmith's unexpected journey. Mikhail, Andrei's young apprentice, pushed through the crowd, face flushed with emotion. Master Vlad, is it true? You're leaving? His voice cracked with adolescent distress. Andrei knelt to meet the boy's eyes. Only for a time, Mikhail. Stefan will oversee your training until I return. But why? The boy's confusion was palpable. The winter festival is coming. You promised to help me forge my first ceremonial dagger. Placing a calloused hand on the boy's shoulder, Andrei spoke with gentle firmness. Sometimes duty calls us away from what we love. Remember what I taught you about metal, Mikhail? The apprentice sniffed, straightening slightly. That even the strongest can be reshaped by fire, but its true nature remains. Exactly. Andrei nodded approvingly. Whatever happens, I remain the same man who taught you. That won't change. He pressed a small wrapped bundle into the boy's hands. I finished it early. Your ceremonial dagger. May it serve you well until I return. Mikhail clutched the gift to his chest, tears welling but held back with fierce determination. I'll make you proud, master. Andrei's throat worked as he stood. You already do. The old village elder approached next, his wizened face solemn. The stranger brings trouble to our door, Andrei Vlad. Royal business has no place in Runk. I go to prevent trouble, Elder Mircha, not bring it. Andrei replied respectfully. Trust that I act in the best interest of our village. The old man studied him intently before nodding slowly. Your father, Constantine, would understand duty. Go with our blessing. He pressed something into Andrei's palm. Wear this. The old magics still protect those who believe. Irina glimpsed a small carved wolf's head, an ancient symbol of protection in Romanian folklore. Despite herself, she felt reassured by the talisman. In these uncertain times, they would need all the protection they could get. As the crowd dispersed, Irina and Andrei set off along the eastern trail, leaving Runk behind. The pony trudged steadily through the deepening snow, carrying their provisions and Andrei's most essential tools. We should avoid the main roads, Irina advised as they reached a fork in the path. Corbea's men will be watching them, especially now. Andrei frowned. Especially now? News of the king's death will have spread. Corbea will be securing his position, eliminating potential threats. She gave him a meaningful look, including any rumored heirs. You believe he knows about me? He may suspect. The king's sudden interest in his legacy, his private meetings with the royal confessor to witness the document I carry. These would have raised Corbea's suspicions. Irina pointed to a narrow deer track. This way. It's longer but safer. They traveled in silence for several hours, the forest growing denser around them. Andrei moved with surprising stealth for such a large man, his hunter's instincts taking over as they navigated the wilderness. Occasionally, he would raise a hand, halting Irina while he listened to the forest sounds, ensuring they weren't followed. By midday, they reached a small clearing where a frozen stream cut through the landscape. Andrei tethered the pony while Irina gathered dry wood for a small fire. As flames crackled to life, Andrei studied Irina with new intensity. You never told me why. Why what? She asked, warming her hands over the fire. Why you? Why would the king trust a slave with this mission? With his gold, his confession, his legacy? His eyes narrowed. There's more to your story than you've shared. Irina's fingers stilled. She had known this question would come eventually. Does it matter? I'm here to help you claim what's rightfully yours. It matters, Andre insisted. I'm risking everything on your word. I deserve the truth. The fire popped and hissed between them as Irina considered her response. Finally, she met his gaze. I was brought to the castle 15 years ago, captured during a raid on a neighboring kingdom. I was 21, educated as a lady's companion. My family was killed. I became property. She spoke matter-of-factly, but Andre didn't miss the shadow that crossed her face. The king noticed me because I didn't cower like the others. I met his gaze when I served his wine. A small defiance, but in his world of sycophants it stood out. And for that, he entrusted you with finding his heir? Andre's skepticism was evident. No, Irina replied softly. For that he had me beaten. But over the years he came to respect me in his way. I served in his private chambers, silent, observant. I knew his moods, his secrets, his regrets. She stared into the flames. In his final days, when fever loosened his tongue, he spoke of you, of your mother, of his shame. The court physician and royal advisors dismissed it as delirium, but I listened. I remembered. Still, Andre pressed, to trust a slave with gold, with royal documents, who better? Irina challenged. A nobleman would have his own ambitions. A soldier would be noticed. But me? A bitter smile touched her lips. I was invisible. Furniture. No one would suspect the dying king had entrusted his greatest secret to a mere slave woman. Andre absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. And what do you gain from this, Irina? If I were to claim the throne, still a remote possibility, what would you ask in return? The question caught her off guard. What did she want? Freedom. She already had that, and the gold to secure it. Power, revenge, neither had ever motivated her. A world where people are not property, she said finally. Where a girl like I was doesn't become a slave because of where she was born or who her parents were. She met his gaze steadily. Corbea would never build such a world, but you might. Something shifted in Andre's eyes. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. Before he could respond, a distant sound caught his attention. He raised a hand for silence, his body tensing. Horses, he whispered. At least 4, moving fast. In one fluid motion, he extinguished their small fire with snow. We've been found. Irina's heart lurched. How? We've been so careful. Someone in the village must have talked, or been paid to talk. Andre was already gathering their belongings. We can't outrun them with the pony. Then we separate, Irina decided quickly. I'll take the pony north, making an obvious trail. You go east, toward the old monastery ruins. We'll reconnect at the crossroads near Brasov. Andre shook his head. Too dangerous for you alone. I survived 15 years at court, Irina reminded him, a steel edge entering her voice. I can handle a few of Corbea's thugs. You are the one who matters now. Their eyes locked in silent battle of wills. Finally, Andre nodded reluctantly. 2 days. I'll wait at the crossroads for 2 days. If you don't appear, I will, Irina assured him, already mounting the pony. Trust me as I've trusted you. As she urged the pony north, creating a deliberate trail in the snow, Irina glanced back once to see Andre melting into the forest like a shadow, moving with the silent efficiency of a man accustomed to hunting in these mountains. For the first time since leaving the castle, Irina felt a stirring of something beyond duty or purpose, a flicker of admiration, of connection. Andre Vlad was not merely the king's biological son, he possessed a nobility of spirit that Petru Dragoș had never known. Perhaps, she thought as the sounds of pursuit grew closer, there was hope for Ardeal after all. The ancient walls of Castle Ardeal rose like a dark specter against the winter sky, its towers and battlements draped in layers of ice that glinted in the pale moonlight. Within the great hall, Duke Nikolai Corbeia reclined on the throne that was not yet officially his, swirling wine in a golden goblet as he surveyed the assembled nobles with cold satisfaction. 3 days since our beloved king's passing, he announced, his voice carrying through the cavernous space, and already the kingdom feels more ordered. A ripple of nervous laughter followed from those courtiers eager to align themselves with the new power. Corbeia was not a physically imposing man, slender with features that might have been handsome had they not been twisted by years of calculation and cruelty. His black hair, threaded with silver at the temples, was impeccably styled, and his garments were of the finest quality, adorned with pelts and gold embroidery that spoke of excessive wealth. "Of course," he continued, setting down his goblet with deliberate precision, "there are still elements that require attention." His gaze settled on Lord Radu Lupescu, captain of the Royal Guard, who stood rigidly at attention near the door, his weathered face impassive. "Captain, what news of our missing servant girl?" Lupescu stepped forward, his military bearing unchanged despite the tension evident in his jaw. At 50, he was a veteran of countless battles, his loyalty to the crown, not to the man who wore it, well known throughout the kingdom. "No trace yet, Your Grace," he replied, the honorific slightly strained. "But snow has covered many tracks. She could be anywhere by now." "Curious, is it not," Corbeia mused, "that a slave would flee on the very night our king took his final breath, and with quite a substantial amount of gold, if the treasury records are to be believed." "Perhaps she feared what would come after," suggested Lady Elena Antonescu from her position near the hearth. Though approaching 60, she remained a formidable presence, one of the few nobles who had not yet openly pledged allegiance to Corbeia. Transitions of power can be unpredictable for those of lower station. Corbeia's eyes narrowed at the veiled criticism. "Indeed, Lady Antonescu, all the more reason to restore order swiftly." He gestured to his personal guard. "Double the patrols. I want this thief found and brought to justice." As the nobles dispersed after the audience, Lupescu found himself walking alongside Lady Antonescu down a dimly lit corridor. "He fears something," she murmured, just loudly enough for the captain to hear. "This hunt for a mere servant girl seems excessive, even for him." "I've served 3 kings," Lupescu replied quietly, "and never have I seen such haste to secure power. It's as if he fears a challenge that isn't visible. Perhaps it isn't, yet." Lady Antonescu paused at an intersection of hallways, ensuring they were alone. The old king was delirious toward the end. Speaking of regrets, of a son. Lupescu's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened. "Rumors and nothing more." "Are they?" Lady Antonescu arched an elegant eyebrow. Irina was no ordinary slave. She attended the king personally for years. If anyone knew his secrets. Their conversation was interrupted by approaching footsteps. Lord Dumitru Corbeia, the duke's younger brother and most loyal enforcer, rounded the corner, his hand resting casually on his sword hilt. "Discussing matters of state?" he inquired with false lightness. "My brother would be interested to hear your concerns personally." "Merely reminiscing about our late king," Lady Antonescu replied smoothly. "His wisdom will be sorely missed." With a graceful nod, she continued down the hallway, her back straight as a sword. Dumitru watched her go, his expression calculating. "She remains uncommitted to our cause, Captain. As do you." The implied threat hung in the air between them. "My commitment is to Ardial and its people," Lupescu responded evenly. "As it has always been." Dumitru's smile did not reach his eyes. "Ensure it stays that way." Meanwhile, in a modest inn near the eastern gates of Brasov, Irina sat before a small fire, her clothes still damp from the treacherous mountain crossing. She had abandoned the pony 2 days earlier after successfully leading Corbeia's men deep into a snow-filled ravine where their heavier horses had struggled to follow. The gold coins sewn into her garments weighed heavily, but not as heavily as her worry for Andrei. The door to the inn creaked open, bringing a blast of cold air. Irina's heart leapt as a tall figure entered, shaking snow from his cloak. Andrei had lost weight during their separation. his face leaner and more angular, emphasizing his resemblance to the royal bloodline even further. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Relief washed over his features as he made his way to her table. "You made it," he said simply, settling across from her. There was a new cut above his right eyebrow, already scabbing over. "As did you," she replied, resisting the unexpected urge to reach across and touch the wound. Though not unscathed, it seems. A grim smile tugged at his mouth. The monastery wasn't as abandoned as we thought. Corbea's men were using it as an outpost. He lowered his voice. "I learned things, Irina. Troubling things." The serving girl approached, but Andrei waved her away, leaning closer. "The king's death has not been publicly announced yet. Corbea claims he's ailing but recovering, buying time to eliminate potential opposition." Irina nodded. "Classic strategy. By the time the death is confirmed, his position will be unassailable." "There's more," Andrei continued. "Noble families loyal to the old king are reporting missing members. Lord Vasil's youngest son, Lady Christia's husband, vanished without explanation. Hostages, Irina surmised. Or worse. "This isn't just a power grab," Andrei said, his voice hardening. "It's a purge." Irina studied him, noting the subtle changes in his demeanor. The reluctant blacksmith was already transforming, responsibility and righteous anger forging him into something more. "We need allies," she said, "before we approach the castle, people of influence who can support your claim." Andrei nodded thoughtfully. "The monastery guards mentioned Lady Antonescu. Apparently she's been questioning Corbea openly in court, demanding to see the king." "Elena Antonescu?" Irina's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, she would be valuable. She commands the respect of the older noble houses, and her lands provide much of the kingdom's grain. Corbea can't move against her without risking famine." "Where would we find her?" "Her winter estate lies a day's journey south of here," Irina replied. "But approaching her directly would be dangerous. Her household will be watched." Andrei contemplated this, absently tracing patterns in the condensation left by his mug. "What about the captain of the guard? You mentioned he was loyal to the king." "Radu Lupescu." Irina nodded. "One of the few truly honorable men at court. But he's trapped within the castle walls, surrounded by Corbea's spies." "Then we focus on Lady Antonescu first," Andrei decided. "If we can convince her of my identity, she might help us contact Lupescu." As they discussed strategy, Irina couldn't help but notice how naturally Andrei had begun to think like a ruler, weighing options, considering consequences, putting the welfare of others before his own safety. She had expected to guide him through this process, but his natural leadership was already emerging. "We should rest," she said finally, aware that both were exhausted from their separate journeys. "The innkeeper knows me only as a merchant's widow. It would be best if we maintain that pretense." Andrei nodded, but as he rose to secure his own room, a commotion erupted near the door. A royal messenger had entered, accompanied by 2 guards bearing Corbea's insignia. The messenger unrolled a parchment and began to read in a loud, formal voice. "Hear ye, citizens of Ardeal. It is with profound sorrow that Lord Regent Nicolae Corbea announces the death of our beloved monarch, King Petru Dragoș, who passed peacefully in his sleep 3 nights past." A shocked murmur ran through the inn as the messenger continued. "In accordance with the king's final wishes, Lord Corbea will continue to serve as regent until his formal coronation at the winter solstice. All citizens are commanded to observe a period of mourning and to report any persons spreading falsehoods or discord during this time of transition." The guards posted the proclamation by the door, their suspicious gazes sweeping the room before they departed. In their wake, the inn erupted into anxious conversation. "Sooner than I expected," Irina murmured. "He must be growing concerned about the rumors." Andrei's expression had darkened. "The winter solstice is barely 2 weeks away. Once he's crowned, challenging him becomes treason rather than rightful succession." "Then we have no time to lose," Irina said, rising. "We leave for Lady Antonescu's estate at first light." As they retired to their respective rooms, Andrei paused in the narrow hallway. "Irina," he said softly, "if this fails, If I cannot prove my claim or gather enough support, Corbea will not show mercy to those who assisted me." His concern for her safety, despite the enormity of his own situation, stirred something in Irina's chest. She met his gaze steadily. "I chose this path knowing the risks," she replied. "As did you." "Yes," he acknowledged. "But I am supposedly born to this burden. You could still walk away, use the gold to start a new life far from here." Irina smiled faintly. "There are things worth more than safety, Andrei Vlad. Justice is one of them." As she closed her door, she leaned against it, heart beating faster than the moment warranted. It had been a long time since anyone had shown concern for her welfare, longer still since she had allowed herself to feel anything beyond the dull acceptance of her station. Outside, snow began to fall once more, blanketing the city in silent white. In the castle high above, Duke Corbea plotted his final ascension to power. And somewhere between those 2 points, fate was being rewoven, thread by thread, connection by connection. The game had truly begun. Lady Elena Antonescu's winter estate sprawled across a sheltered valley, its stone walls and tiled roofs dusted with snow like sugar on a holiday cake. Unlike the forbidding darkness of Castle Ardil, warm light spilled from dozens of windows, creating a golden glow against the twilight sky. "More welcoming than I expected," Andrei murmured as they observed from the edge of the forest. They had traveled through the day, avoiding the main roads where Corbea's proclamations were being delivered by mounted messengers. "Lady Antonescu has always valued comfort over intimidation," Irina replied. "But make no mistake, her defenses are formidable. Those guards at the gate are veteran soldiers, not decorative sentries." Andrei studied the estate with a craftsman's eye. 4 watchtowers, clear sight lines from all approaches, positioned near a flowing river that can't be easily forded. Whoever designed this understood siege warfare. "Her late husband was a military strategist," Irina explained. "Now we need to get inside without raising alarms. I doubt the guards will welcome 2 travel-worn strangers asking for an audience with their mistress." Andrei considered this problem, then reached inside his coat to withdraw the medallion his mother had given him. The tarnished silver caught the fading light, the royal crest still recognizable despite years of concealment. "Sometimes the direct approach is best," he said, his decision made. "Lady Antonescu is known for her loyalty to the crown. Let's test it." Before Irina could object, Andrei was striding purposefully toward the main gate, his bearing suddenly regal despite his commoner's clothing. Irina hurried after him, heart pounding. The guards straightened as they approached, hands moving to sword hilts. "Halt!" commanded the senior officer, a grizzled man with a scar bisecting his left cheek. "State your business." Andrei held up the medallion, letting it catch the torchlight. "I seek an audience with Lady Antonescu on a matter concerning the future of Ardial." The guard's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the royal crest, but his expression remained skeptical. "And who might you be to carry such a token?" "Someone whose identity is for Lady Antonescu's ears alone," Andrei replied with quiet authority. The guard exchanged glances with his companion before nodding curtly. "Wait here." He disappeared through a side door, leaving them under the watchful eye of the remaining sentry. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before the guard returned, accompanied by an elegantly dressed steward. "Lady Antonescu will see you," the steward announced, his tone carefully neutral. "But you will be escorted at all times, and your weapons, if you carry any, will remain with the guards." They surrendered Andrei's hunting knife and followed the steward through a series of courtyards and corridors, eventually arriving at a well-appointed study. A fire blazed in a large hearth, illuminating walls lined with books and maps, unusual treasures for a noblewoman's private chambers. Lady Antonescu herself stood by the fire, tall and straight-backed despite her years. Her silver hair was arranged in an intricate crown of braids, and her deep blue gown, though simple by court standards, was clearly of the finest quality. Sharp eyes assessed them from a face still handsome, marked by intelligence rather than cruelty. "Leave us, Marius," she instructed the steward. When he hesitated, she added firmly, I am quite capable of calling for help should these visitors prove troublesome. Once alone, she gestured to chairs positioned near the fire. Please be seated. The night is cold and you both look as though you've traveled hard. As they settled into the offered chairs, Lady Antonescu retrieved the medallion that Andrei had surrendered to the guards. She examined it carefully, turning it over in her slender fingers. The personal seal of King Petru Dragoș, she observed. Not seen in many years, and certainly not something one finds in common hands. I am most curious as to how you came by it, and what brings you to my door with such a token. Andrei met her gaze directly. It was given to my mother 38 years ago, my lady, by the king himself. Understanding dawned in Lady Antonescu's eyes, but she revealed nothing in her expression. A bold claim. One that many would consider dangerous in the current climate. Truth is often dangerous, Irina spoke up, especially to those who build power on lies. Lady Antonescu's attention shifted to Irina, studied her with new interest. You I recognize, though you've changed since I last saw you at court. You were the king's personal attendant, Irina, was it not? Yes, my lady, Irina confirmed, surprised to be remembered. Interesting. Lady Antonescu returned to her own chair, arranging her skirts with deliberate care. So, the king's loyal servant and a man claiming royal blood arrive on my doorstep days after Corbea declares himself regent. I assume this is not coincidence. The king sent me to find his son before he died, Irina explained. He wished to right the wrongs of his past and ensure the throne passed to his true heir. And you believe this is that heir? Lady Antonescu's skeptical gaze swept over Andrei. Forgive my bluntness, but you look more like a tradesman than a prince. I am a blacksmith, my lady, Andrei acknowledged without embarrassment. Raised in Runk village by my mother and the man I believed was my father. I had no knowledge of my true parentage until Irina arrived with the king's message. Lady Antonescu leaned forward slightly. If what you say is true, you are undertaking an extremely perilous endeavor. Corbea has spent years positioning himself for power. He will not relinquish it merely because a blacksmith appears with a medallion and a story. Which is why we need allies, Irina said. People of influence who value legitimate succession over Corbea's ambition. And you believe I am such an ally? Lady Antonescu's tone was measured. Based on what assessment? Your reputation for honor, Andrei replied, and the fact that you have not yet pledged allegiance to Corbea, despite the advantages such an alliance might offer. A ghost of a smile touched Lady Antonescu's lips. Well observed. But reputation and reticence are not proof of my loyalties. No, Andrei agreed. But your actions during the border dispute 3 winters past speak volumes. You provided grain from your own stores to feed displaced villagers, despite the crown's orders to reserve all resources for the army. Surprise flickered across Lady Antonescu's face. You are well informed for someone raised in a remote village. I listen, Andrei said simply. The people remember those who show them compassion. Lady Antonescu rose and moved to a cabinet, retrieving a crystal decanter. As she poured 3 small glasses of amber liquid, she spoke with her back turned. Even if I believed your claim, and I am not yet saying I do, supporting you would place my household and tenants in grave danger. Corbea is ruthless toward those he perceives as enemies. She handed them each a glass. What proof can you offer beyond the medallion? A trinket, however rare, is not enough to challenge a regency. Irina reached into her bodice and withdrew the sealed parchment. The king's own declaration, witnessed by Father Mihail, the royal confessor. It acknowledges Andrei as his son and rightful heir. Lady Antonescu took the document, examining the unbroken royal seal. Father Mihail was found dead 2 days ago, an apparent suicide, though few believe it. She met Irina's gaze meaningfully. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Too convenient, Irina agreed grimly. Corbea is eliminating anyone who might challenge his claim. Lady Antonescu broke the seal and read the parchment carefully, her expression revealing nothing. When she finally looked up, her eyes held a new respect. This appears genuine, she acknowledged. But we will need more than paper and wax to win this battle. The people must see you as their rightful king, not merely by birth, but by character and capability. I do not seek power for its own sake, Andrei said firmly. I seek justice for those who would suffer under Corbea's rule. Lady Antonescu studied him intently, as if searching for something in his features. You have your father's look about you, she said finally. But thankfully, it seems you may have inherited your mother's heart. She set down her glass decisively. Very well. I will help you, cautiously, and with conditions. Relief washed over Irina's face, but Andrei remained solemn. Name your conditions, my lady. First, you will remain here as my guests, officially distant relatives from the northern provinces, while I make discreet inquiries among trusted nobles. Lady Antonescu's tone was brisk and practical. Second, you will heed my counsel regarding court politics and protocols. A king must know how to rule, not merely how to fight. Agreed. Andrei nodded. And third, she fixed him with a penetrating stare. If at any point I determine that your claim is false or your character unworthy of the throne, I withdraw my support immediately. The kingdom has suffered enough under unfit rulers. I would expect nothing less, Andrei replied, meeting her gaze steadily. Lady Antonescu smiled, a genuine warmth replacing her previous reserve. Then let us begin. Corbea's coronation is planned for the winter solstice, barely 12 days from now. We have much to accomplish and precious little time. As servants were summoned to prepare chambers for the unexpected guests, Lady Antonescu drew Irina aside. You risked everything to bring him here, she observed quietly. Such loyalty to a dead king is unusual. Irina's gaze drifted to where Andrei stood examining a map of the kingdom, his profile outlined by firelight. It's not just loyalty to the king, she admitted softly. Lady Antonescu's knowing eyes followed Irina's gaze. Ah, she said with gentle understanding. That complicates matters. It changes nothing, Irina insisted. My duty remains clear. Perhaps, Lady Antonescu replied, but in my experience the heart seldom follows duty's straight path. She squeezed Irina's hand briefly. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we face the task of transforming a blacksmith into a king. That night, alone in a chamber more luxurious than any she had occupied even as a free woman, Irina stood by the window, watching snow fall gently on Lady Antonescu's carefully tended gardens. Somewhere beyond those peaceful grounds, Corbea's men hunted for them, the noose of tyranny tightening around Ardil with each passing day. And yet, for the first time since leaving Castle Ardil, Irina felt a flicker of genuine hope. In Andrei, she had found not just the king's heir, but a man worthy of a crown, a man who understood that true nobility came from character rather than bloodline. As sleep finally claimed her, Irina realized that she had embarked on this journey to fulfill a dying man's wish. But somewhere along the snow-covered roads and forest paths, her purpose had transformed. Now she fought not for the past, but for the future. A future where Ardil might know justice and compassion instead of tyranny and fear. A future where, perhaps, even a former slave might find her place in a world remade. For 4 days, Lady Antonescu's estate became a school of royal preparation. Andrei's days were filled with lessons in court protocol, genealogy of noble houses, and the complex web of alliances that sustained the kingdom. By night, messengers slipped away with carefully encoded communications to potential supporters. On the 5th evening, exhausted from hours of diplomatic role-playing, Andrei sought refuge in the estate's modest forge. Lady Antonescu maintained it primarily for shoeing horses and repairing farm implements, but to Andrei, the familiar smells of coal, iron, and sweat offered a comforting reminder of his true self. He had just stoked the fire to a satisfying glow when he heard soft footsteps behind him. I thought I might find you here, Irina said, stepping into the circle of orange light. Lady Antonescu was concerned when you missed the evening meal. Andrei smiled ruefully. I needed to remember who I am before I was buried under who I'm supposed to become. He lifted a half-formed piece of metal from the forge with tongs. Metal doesn't care about court politics or succession rights. It responds to strength, patience, and skill, things I actually possess. Irina moved closer, watching as he hammered the glowing metal with practiced strokes. You're adapting well to your lessons. Lady Antonescu is impressed by how quickly you grasp political nuances. I'm a quick study, he replied, dunking the metal into water with a satisfying hiss of steam. But sometimes I wonder if we're merely replacing one ambitious nobleman with another. Will I truly be any different from Corbea once power is in my grasp? Irina's expression softened. The fact that you ask that question already separates you from him. Corbea has never doubted his right to take whatever he desires. Andrei set aside his work and turned to face her fully. In the forge's glow, her features were limned with golden light, her usually guarded expression open and thoughtful. Tell me something true, Irina, he requested quietly. Not what Lady Antonescu thinks I should hear, or what supports our cause. Something real. Irina considered his request, then nodded slowly. The truth is that kingship will change you. Power always does. The question isn't whether you'll change, but how you'll direct that change. She met his gaze steadily. I've seen power corrupt good intentions and justify cruelty. I've also seen it squandered by those too weak to use it properly. And which fate awaits me? Andrei asked, genuinely curious about her assessment. Neither, I hope, Irina replied. The best rulers are transformed by power into their truest selves, not corrupted, not diminished, but revealed. Andrei laughed softly. Now you sound like Lady Antonescu. Perhaps her wisdom is contagious. Irina smiled. Then, more seriously, there's news. A messenger arrived during dinner with word from Captain Lupescu. Andrei's attention sharpened. He's responded to our outreach? Yes. He believes your claim may be legitimate and is cautiously supportive, but he needs proof he can present to wavering nobles and military commanders. The medallion and the king's declaration are not enough, Irina interrupted gently. Corbea has already begun spreading rumors that you are an impostor wielding forged documents. Andrei's frustration was evident. What more proof could there be? My mother is too ill to travel, and those who might have confirmed my birth are long dead. Irina hesitated. Not all. According to Lady Antonescu, there is one person still living who was present when the king recognized you as his son, however privately and reluctantly. The Queen Mother. Queen Elisabetta? Andrei's eyebrows rose in surprise. I thought she died years ago. Most believe so. In truth, after King Petru's father died and he took the throne, he confined his mother to a remote wing of the castle. She was difficult, and he feared her influence. Over time, people simply assumed she had passed away. And this forgotten queen could confirm my identity. Andrei sounded skeptical. She was there when the king returned from that summer hunt and confessed his indiscretion to his parents, Irina explained. The old king wanted to legitimize you immediately, to secure the succession with a healthy grandson. But Queen Elisabetta forbade it, fearing scandal. She insisted you remain hidden, a secret heir to be acknowledged only if absolutely necessary. Andrei absorbed this information, his expression hardening. So my grandfather wanted me, but this queen condemned me and my mother to obscurity for the sake of appearances. Royal politics are rarely kind, Irina said softly. But now her testimony could be your strongest claim to the throne. And where is this queen now? Still in the castle, in private chambers near the royal crypt. Few visit her except the servants who bring her meals and tend to her needs. Andrei set down his hammer with a decisive thud. Then we must speak with her. Impossible! Irina shook her head. The castle is Corbea's stronghold now. Every entrance is guarded by men loyal to him. There must be another way in, Andrei insisted. No fortress is truly impenetrable. The forge door opened, admitting Lady Antonescu wrapped in a fur-lined cloak. You are correct, she said, having overheard his last statement. And as it happens, I know of such an entrance. She approached the workbench, unrolling a yellowed parchment that proved to be an ancient architectural drawing of Castle Ardil. My late husband was fascinated by fortifications, she explained. He collected these plans from the royal archives years ago. Her slender finger traced a faint line on the parchment. Here, a tunnel built during the Great Siege 2 centuries past. It runs from the royal crypt beneath the chapel to a cave in the western hillside. Andre studied the drawing with intense focus. Is it still passable? Unknown, Lady Antonescu admitted. Few remember its existence now, but if it remains intact, it would provide access directly to the wing where Queen Elisabetta resides. We must try, Andre decided. When can we depart? Not we, Irina corrected firmly. I should go alone. I know the castle intimately, and a single person will attract less attention. Absolutely not. Andre's response was immediate. The risk is too great. Something flashed in Irina's eyes, a mixture of determination and something warmer, more personal. I survived 15 years in that castle, Andre. I know its rhythms, its shadows, its secrets. You would be recognized immediately as a stranger. She's right, Lady Antonescu interjected. Moreover, the Queen knows Irina. She might speak freely to a familiar servant, but would be suspicious of an unknown man claiming royal blood. Andre paced the small forge, clearly unhappy with this plan, but unable to refute its logic. Finally, he turned to Irina. If I cannot dissuade you, then at least let me accompany you as far as the tunnel entrance. If you're not back by dawn, I'll find a way to come after you. The intensity in his voice surprised all of them, including Andre himself. For a moment, the pretense of political alliance fell away, revealing the genuine concern beneath. I'll return, Irina promised softly. Lady Antonescu cleared her throat delicately. The tunnel entrance lies near the old hermit's cave, half a day's journey from here. You should leave before first light to reach it by midday. She rolled up the architectural plans. I'll have supplies and suitable clothing prepared. After she departed, silence fell between Andre and Irina. The forge fire crackled and hissed, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. Why are you doing this? Andre asked finally. The truth, Irina. You've fulfilled your promise to the king. You could take the gold and build a new life anywhere, far from these dangers. Irina's gaze was steady. Perhaps once that would have been enough. But now? She glanced around the simple forge. I've seen what kind of king you could be. The kind who remembers his roots even while learning to wear a crown. The kind who questions whether power will change him for the better. Her voice softened. That's a future worth risking everything for. Andre crossed the distance between them, his calloused hand reaching up to gently touch the side of her face. The gesture was tentative, almost reverent, as if he feared she might pull away. If something happened to you because of me, because of this claim I never sought, he began. It would be my choice. She interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. For once in my life, completely my choice. The space between them seemed charged with unspoken words, with possibilities neither had dared acknowledge during their dangerous journey. Slowly, inevitably, Andre lowered his head until his lips met hers in a kiss that spoke of tenderness rather than passion, of connection rather than desire. When they parted, a new understanding had formed between them, fragile as new forged metal, but with the potential for equal strength. We should rest, Irina said finally. Tomorrow will test us both. As they walked back toward the main house, their hands found each other in the darkness, fingers intertwining in silent promise. Inside the estate, Lady Antonescu watched their approach from a window, her expression thoughtful. Politics had dictated her initial support for Andre's claim, but observing the bond forming between the blacksmith and the former slave had awakened something else. A faint, almost forgotten hope that Ardil might someday be ruled by wisdom and compassion rather than ambition and fear. She turned from the window and moved to her writing desk, where a half-written letter awaited completion. There were still allies to be secured, strategies to be refined. The path ahead remained perilous, but for the first time since King Petru's death, she allowed herself to believe that a better future might be possible. For the kingdom, for all of them. Dawn had not yet broken when Andre and Irina set out, the sky still a canvas of fading stars. Lady Antonescu had provided them with nondescript clothing suitable for travelers of modest means, nothing that would attract attention in the villages they might pass. 2 horses carried them swiftly through the silent landscape, frost crunching beneath their hooves. They spoke little during the journey, each lost in private thoughts about the task ahead. By midday they reached the western hills that cradled Castle Ardil in their protective embrace. From this distance the castle appeared deceptively peaceful, its towers gleaming in the winter sunlight. There, Andre pointed to a rocky outcropping half hidden by pine trees. That must be the hermit's cave Lady Antonescu described. They dismounted, securing the horses in a sheltered hollow before proceeding on foot. The cave entrance was nearly invisible, concealed by generations of forest growth and deliberate camouflage from a time when secrecy meant survival. Inside, the air was cold and damp, heavy with the scent of earth and stone. Andre struck a flint, lighting the small torch they had brought. The flickering flame revealed a natural chamber that narrowed toward the back into what appeared to be a man-made tunnel. "This is it," Irina confirmed, examining the precisely cut stone archway that marked the tunnel's beginning. Faded symbols, protective runes from an earlier, more superstitious age, were carved into the keystone. Andre tested the first few steps, checking for structural weakness. "It seems sound, though there's water damage in places." He turned to Irina, his expression grave. "You still have time to reconsider. We could find another way." Irina shook her head firmly. "There is no other way. Not with the coronation only days away." She checked the small dagger concealed in her boot and adjusted the plain gray cloak Lady Antonescu had given her. "Remember, if I'm not back by dawn, I'm coming after you," Andre finished, his tone brooking no argument, no matter the consequences. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of what had begun in the forge the night before. Irina reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek in a feather-light touch. "I will return," she promised. Before emotion could weaken her resolve, she turned and entered the tunnel, the small oil lamp she carried casting long shadows on the ancient stones. Andre watched until her light became a distant pinprick in the darkness, then faded entirely. The tunnel stretched before Irina like a throat of stone, occasionally widening into chambers where supplies had once been stored during the long-ago siege. Time had collapsed sections in places, forcing her to crawl through narrow passages where her shoulders brushed the damp walls. Twice she had to wade through ankle-deep water where underground springs had breached the structure. After what felt like hours but was likely less than one, the tunnel began to slope upward. The air grew marginally warmer, tinged with the scent of incense and candle wax. She was approaching the royal crypt. A final turn revealed a stone wall with a small, iron-bound door set into it. Irina extinguished her lamp. Light would only betray her now, and pressed her ear against the cold metal, listening for any sound from the other side. Hearing nothing, she cautiously pushed against the ancient door. It resisted at first, then yielded with a soft groan of protesting hinges. Irina winced at the sound, freezing in place as she waited to see if it had alerted anyone. When no alarm came, she slipped through the narrow opening into the royal crypt. The vast underground chamber was dimly lit by perpetual memorial candles that cast ghostly light over generations of royal sarcophagi. The most recent, King Petru's, stood near the center, its marble surface still gleaming with newness. Irina paused beside it, a complicated mixture of emotions washing over her. The man interred within had shown her cruelty and, in his final act, an unexpected mercy. Neither fully absolved the other. "Rest in peace," she whispered, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement that his final choice had set her on this path to freedom and purpose. Moving silently between the ancient tombs, Irina reached the crypt's exit, a narrow staircase that wound upward to the royal chapel. She knew from Lady Antonescu's instructions that Queen Elisabetta's chambers were accessed through a connecting corridor from the chapel's north transept. The chapel was empty save for a single elderly priest dozing in a side pew. Keeping to the shadows, Irina made her way to the heavy tapestry that concealed the entrance to the Queen Mother's wing. Behind it, as expected, stood a simple wooden door, unguarded. Few remembered the aged queen's existence, and fewer still sought her company. Irina knocked softly, schooling her features into the deferential expression she had worn for years as a servant. After a moment, the door creaked open to reveal an ancient lady in waiting, her rheumy eyes squinting suspiciously. "What business brings you at this hour?" she demanded in a quavering voice. "A message for Her Majesty," Irina replied, keeping her voice low and respectful. "From Lady Antonescu regarding a matter of succession." The old woman's eyes widened slightly at the mention of Lady Antonescu, a name that still commanded respect in the castle. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Wait here. I will see if Her Majesty is receiving." Irina was left standing in a dimly lit antechamber that smelled of medicinal herbs and the peculiar mustiness of rooms too long unopened to fresh air. The furnishings were opulent but old-fashioned, belonging to an earlier era of the kingdom's history. After several minutes, the lady-in-waiting returned. "Her Majesty will see you. Brief, mind. Her strength is not what it was." She led Irina through a series of chambers, each progressively smaller and more intimate, until they reached a small sitting room where a fire burned low in the grate. Beside it, in a high-backed chair cushioned with faded velvet, sat Queen Elisabetta. Time had not been kind to the once formidable queen. Her body had diminished into bird-like frailty, though her back remained straight as a sword. Her face was a map of deep wrinkles surrounding eyes that retained a penetrating sharpness. A cap of intricate lace-covered hair that had long since turned from silver to snow-white. "Leave us, Marta," she commanded, her voice surprisingly strong for one so physically diminished. The lady-in-waiting curtsied and withdrew, closing the door behind her. "So Elena Antonescu sends servants to do her negotiating now," the queen observed dryly. "The world truly has changed since my day." Irina curtsied deeply. "Your Majesty, I come regarding a matter of utmost importance to the kingdom." "Don't waste my time with formalities, girl," the queen interrupted impatiently. "I may be forgotten by the court, but I still hear things. Corbia plans to crown himself king at the solstice. My son is dead, and now, mysteriously, you appear with messages about succession." Her eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly." Emboldened by the queen's directness, Irina met her gaze. "Your Majesty, I come on behalf of your grandson, the son of King Petru and Lydia of Runk." A flash of genuine shock crossed the queen's wizened features before she mastered it. "That matter was settled decades ago," she said coldly. "The child was provided for and removed from court politics, as was proper." "The child is now a man of 38, Irina replied. "A man who bears the unmistakable mark of Dragosh blood, who carries the royal medallion given to his mother, and who holds a document signed by King Petru acknowledging him as heir." Queen Elisabetta's hands, gnarled with age but still adorned with magnificent rings, gripped the arms of her chair. "And this claimant sent you to me for what purpose? My blessing? My crown jewels? My political support? I have none of these to give." "He sent me for the truth," Irina answered simply. "Your confirmation that King Petru acknowledged his son to you and the late king, even if that acknowledgement was later buried for the sake of appearances." The queen's laugh was bitter. "Truth? In a royal court? You ask for a rare commodity indeed." She leaned forward, studying Irina more carefully. "I remember you now. You were Petru's personal servant, the one who refused to be broken." A hint of reluctant admiration colored her tone. "What stake do you have in this succession drama?" "I seek a ruler who will govern with justice and compassion," Irina replied. "Duke Corbia offers neither." "And this bastard grandson of mine, you believe he does?" The queen's skepticism was evident. "I know he does," Irina said with quiet conviction. "He is everything his father was not: honorable, compassionate, concerned more for his people's welfare than his own power." Queen Elisabetta was silent for a long moment, her sharp gaze assessing Irina. Finally she sighed. "You love him," she stated flatly. "It's written in your eyes when you speak of him." Irina did not deny it. "My feelings are irrelevant to his claim." "On the contrary," the queen replied, "they reveal much about his character. My son inspired fear, greed, ambition, but rarely love." She settled back in her chair, seeming to come to a decision. "Very well. I will tell you what you came to hear, though whether it helps your cause remains to be seen. Outside the Queen's chambers, unbeknownst to either woman, a shadow detached itself from an alcove, a servant who had overheard enough to understand the significance of this clandestine meeting. Silently, he slipped away toward the main castle, where Duke Corbia would be most interested in this unexpected development. Meanwhile, in the hermit's cave, Andre paced restlessly, counting the hours until dawn and praying that Irina would return safely with the testimony they so desperately needed. The kingdom's fate, and his own, hung in the balance of an old queen's words and a former slave's courage. Night had fallen over Castle Ardil, cloaking its towers in shadow when Irina emerged from the Queen Mother's chambers, her mind reeling from what she had learned. Queen Elisabetta had not only confirmed Andre's parentage but provided something far more valuable. A written testimony sealed decades ago, to be opened only if a crisis of succession arose. "I was not always the bitter crone you see before you," the Queen had said, her papery fingers tracing the edges of the yellowed envelope she had retrieved from a hidden compartment in her writing desk. "When my husband learned of Petru's indiscretion, he insisted on preparing for all possibilities. This document confirms the child's royal blood and his right to succession should the main line fail." "Why would he do this?" Irina had asked, carefully accepting the precious document. "Why legitimize a bastard born of a common woman?" The Queen's smile had been thin but genuine. "Because unlike my son, my husband understood that royal blood without royal character creates tyrants. He met the child secretly when he was 5 years old and saw something in him that pleased him greatly, something lacking in his legitimate grandson." Now, with the sealed testimony hidden securely within her bodice, Irina made her way cautiously through the darkened corridors toward the chapel. The priest had retired for the night, leaving the sacred space illuminated only by the eternal flame at the altar and a few votive candles. She had nearly reached the hidden staircase when the chapel door swung open. Irina ducked behind a pillar, heart pounding as 4 of Corbia's personal guards entered, led by his brother Dumitru. "Search every corner," Dumitru commanded. The informant was clear. "The woman is here to gather evidence for the bastard's claim." Irina pressed herself against the cold stone, mind racing. The secret passage to the crypt was her only escape route, but reaching it meant crossing open ground in full view of the searching guards. She would have to wait for an opportunity. Fortune favored her when a commotion erupted in the corridor outside, raised voices and the clatter of weapons. Most of the guards rushed to investigate, leaving only Dumitru and 1 other man in the chapel. "You, check behind the altar," Dumitru instructed his remaining companion. As the guard moved forward, Dumitru himself approached the pillar where Irina hid. She held her breath, sliding silently around the column as Dumitru passed within inches of her hiding place. When his back was turned, she made her decision. There would never be a better chance. With the silent grace learned through years of unobtrusive service, Irina darted from shadow to shadow, reaching the tapestry that concealed the secret passage. As she slipped behind it, she heard Dumitru's shout of discovery. "There! Behind the tapestry!" Irina abandoned stealth for speed, plunging down the winding stairs into the royal crypt. The guard's heavy footsteps thundered behind her as she raced between the ancient sarcophagi, heading for the hidden tunnel entrance. The iron-bound door stood partially ajar as she had left it. Irina slipped through, pushing it closed behind her, just as her pursuers entered the crypt. With trembling hands, she turned the ancient internal lock, knowing it would not hold for long against determined force. Sure enough, moments later the door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it from the other side. The rusty lock groaned but held, for now. Irina didn't wait to see how long her luck would last. She lit her small lamp and plunged into the darkness of the tunnel, her footsteps echoing on the ancient stones. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit gradually faded, but she didn't slow her pace. The tunnel seemed longer on the return journey, each cramped passage and flooded section an obstacle between her and safety, between her and Andre. When she finally glimpsed flickering light ahead, relief flooded through her. Andre stood at the tunnel entrance, torch in hand, his face taut with worry. When he saw her, the transformation was immediate, tension melting into profound relief. "Irina!" He rushed forward, catching her as she stumbled the last few steps. I was about to come after you. We need to move quickly, she gasped, fighting to catch her breath. Corbea's men, they found me in the chapel. They may discover the tunnel entrance. Understanding immediately, Andre extinguished his torch and helped her to where the horses waited. Within moments, they were galloping through the darkened forest, taking a circuitous route back toward Lady Antonescu's estate. Only when they had put several miles between themselves and the castle did they slow to a more sustainable pace, allowing the horses to recover. "Did you succeed?" Andre asked, riding close beside her. "Did the Queen speak with you?" Despite her exhaustion, Irina smiled. "Better than that." She carefully withdrew the sealed document from its hiding place. "She gave us this, a testimony prepared by your grandfather, the old king, confirming your royal heritage and right to succession." Andre stared at the document in wonder. "All these years," he murmured, "even as my mother and I struggled, this proof of my birthright sat locked away in darkness." "Your grandfather wanted to acknowledge you openly," Irina explained, sharing what the Queen had told her. "It was Elisabetta and your father who insisted on secrecy. The old king respected their wishes but prepared for the possibility that someday you might be needed. And now that day has come," Andre said grimly, "though I still wonder if the kingdom would be better served by someone raised to rule rather than to forge steel." "The kingdom has had rulers raised in palaces," Irina reminded him. "What it needs now is one who understands the weight of his decisions on ordinary lives." They rode in companionable silence for a time, the forest gradually thinning as they approached more settled lands. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn when Andre suddenly reined in his horse, head cocked as he listened intently. "Riders," he said tersely, "coming fast from the south." They urged their mounts into a dense copse of pine trees, dismounting to better conceal themselves. Through the branches they could see a group of riders approaching along the main road, not Corbea's men, but common folk, some armed with farming implements, others with hunting bows. "They look like villagers," Irina whispered. "But why would they travel in such numbers before dawn?" Andre's expression was somber. "Something has happened." He stepped from their hiding place, raising his hand in greeting but keeping the other near his hunting knife. "Ho there, friends. What drives you from your hearth so early?" The riders slowed, wary at first, then relaxed slightly as they assessed Andre's plain clothing and open demeanor. Their leader, a burly man with a blacksmith's build not unlike Andre's own, spoke for the group. "We ride for Lady Antonescu's estate to offer our services," he explained. "Word has spread that Duke Corbea has declared her a traitor to the crown. His men march on her lands as we speak." Irina's blood ran cold. "On what grounds does he make such an accusation?" "They say she harbors a pretender to the throne," a woman answered, her face grim beneath a woolen cap. "A commoner claiming royal blood." "And you ride to fight for her?" Andre asked, genuine surprise in his voice. "Against Corbea's trained soldiers?" The blacksmith spat contemptuously. "Corbea's taxes have taken our grain and livestock. His men abuse our daughters with impunity. If Lady Antonescu opposes him, then she has our support, and if this pretender offers a different path for Ardial, we would hear him speak before condemning him." Similar sentiments echoed from the other riders. Andre exchanged a meaningful glance with Irina, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded almost imperceptibly. The moment of decision had arrived sooner than expected. "Friends," Andre said, his voice carrying natural authority, "I am the man Corbea names Pretender. I am Andre Vlad, blacksmith of Runk, and son of King Petru Dragoș." A murmur ran through the gathered villagers, expressions ranging from skepticism to wonder. The blacksmith dismounted, approaching Andre with careful scrutiny. "You have the look," he acknowledged after a moment. "The same brow as on the coins. But words and resemblance mean little against Corbea's swords." "I have more than words," Andre replied, gesturing for Irina to show the sealed document. "I have royal testimony and the support of those who value justice over power. What I lack is an army." "Perhaps," the blacksmith said thoughtfully, "you have the beginnings of one here." He extended a calloused hand. "I am Gavril of Sibiu. My hammer has shaped metal for 20 years, as I suspect yours has too. If you truly offer hope against Corbea's tyranny, my arm is yours to command." One by one, the other villagers voiced similar pledges. As Andrei clasped hands with each of them, Irina witnessed the transformation happening before her eyes. The reluctant blacksmith becoming a leader of men, not through birth or decree, but through the genuine respect his character inspired. "We must reach Lady Antonescu before Corbea's forces," Andrei decided. "How many ride with you?" 30 here, Gavril answered. "But there are more gathering from other villages. Over 100 men and women ready to stand against Corbea's injustice." 100 commoners against trained soldiers, Irina murmured, concern evident in her voice. "A beginning," Andrei countered. "And with Lady Antonescu's household guard and the nobles secretly supporting our cause, perhaps enough to force Corbea to negotiate rather than risk open civil war." As they rode with their newfound allies, the sun crested the horizon, spilling golden light across the snow-covered landscape. Irina found herself studying Andrei's profile, noting how naturally he had assumed command, how easily these strangers had accepted his leadership. This was not the frightened blacksmith who had initially rejected his heritage. This was a man coming into his birthright, not because of royal blood, but because of the strength of character that blood had never guaranteed. For the first time, Irina allowed herself to truly believe they might succeed, that the kingdom might be saved from Corbea's clutches, that the future she had scarcely dared imagine might actually come to pass. But first, they had to reach Lady Antonescu's estate before Corbea's forces, and if they were too late for that, they would need to convert this embryonic uprising into something capable of challenging the established power of the throne. The battle for Ardil's soul had begun. Smoke rose in dark columns against the winter sky as Andrei, Irina, and their growing band of supporters crested the final hill overlooking Lady Antonescu's estate. Below them, the once peaceful valley had become a battlefield. Corbea's forces, at least 100 armored soldiers, surrounded the main house, while Lady Antonescu's guards maintained a defensive perimeter around the inner courtyard. "We're too late," Irina breathed, her heart sinking at the sight of burning outbuildings and trampled fields. Gavril squinted against the morning light. "The main house still stands. Lady Antonescu's people are holding firm." Andrei studied the scene with the calculating eye of a tactician. "They've established a siege but haven't breached the inner defenses yet. We still have time." As they watched, a rider bearing Corbea's banner approached the main gates under a flag of truce. Even from a distance, they could see the rigid posture of Lady Antonescu herself appearing on the battlements to receive the message. "They're negotiating," Andrei observed. "Corbea knows a direct assault would cost him dearly, even in victory. Or he's simply demanding surrender before ordering the attack," Irina countered grimly. Andrei turned to address the assembled villagers, now numbering nearly 50, as stragglers had joined them along the road. His voice carried across the hillside, clear and commanding. "Friends, what you see before you is the face of tyranny, Corbea's answer to those who dare question his right to rule. If Lady Antonescu falls, your villages will be next." He paused, his gaze moving from face to face. "I do not ask you to die for my claim to the throne, but I ask you to stand with me against a man who would burn this kingdom to secure his own power." A murmur of agreement passed through the crowd. Gavril stepped forward, his weathered face resolute. "How do we proceed, my lord? We are willing, but untrained." "We have surprise on our side," Andrei replied, "and numbers that Corbea doesn't know about." He gestured toward the western edge of the estate. "The forest there provides cover almost to the outer walls. If we can move our people into position undetected, we can hit Corbea's forces from behind when they least expect it." "And then?" asked an older woman clutching a woodsman's axe. "Then we make enough noise to convince Corbea that he faces not a rabble, but an army," Andrei said with grim determination. Sometimes perception matters more than reality in battle. As they prepared to move, Irina touched Andrei's arm. "I should take the royal testimony to Lady Antonescu directly," she said quietly. "If negotiations fail, she'll need proof of your claim to rally her allies." Andrei's face darkened. "Too dangerous. The main approach is completely exposed." "There's another way," Irina insisted. "The river that feeds the estate's moat. I can follow it to the Watergate. The guards there will recognize me." Their eyes met in silent argument, both aware of the risks but also of the necessity. Finally, Andrei nodded, his reluctance evident. "Take 3 men with you," he conceded. "And Irina?" He hesitated, words suddenly inadequate. Instead, he pulled her close, pressing his forehead against hers in a gesture of intimacy that spoke volumes. "Return to me. Always," she promised softly. As Irina departed with her small escort, Andrei led the main force through the forest edge, using the trees as cover, until they were positioned just 100 yards from the rear of Corbea's siege line. The villagers moved with surprising discipline, their determination compensating for their lack of military training. At the main gate, the parley had apparently ended. Corbea's messenger rode back toward the main body of troops, where a figure in elaborate armor, Duke Corbea himself, waited on horseback. Even at a distance, his anger was evident in the rigid set of his shoulders and the sharp gestures he made to his commanders. "Lady Antonescu has refused his terms," Gavril observed with grim satisfaction. "Which means he'll attack soon," Andrei replied. "We need to be ready." They didn't wait long. Trumpets sounded from Corbea's lines, and his troops began to form up for an assault on the main gate. Siege ladders were brought forward, and archers moved into position to provide covering fire. "Now!" Andrei commanded, drawing his sword, not the ornate weapon of a nobleman, but the practical, well-used blade of a man accustomed to defending himself. "For our deal and justice!" The villagers surged forward with a roar that shook the valley, erupting from the forest edge like a human avalanche. Their sudden appearance took Corbea's rear guard completely by surprise. Farmers with pitchforks, blacksmiths with hammers, hunters with bows, they fell upon the armored soldiers with the righteous fury of the long oppressed. Simultaneously, Lady Antonescu's forces launched a sortie from the main gate, catching Corbea's troops in a devastating pincer movement. Confusion spread through the Duke's ranks as they tried to determine the size of this unexpected threat. Andrei fought his way toward the center of the battle, Gavril and a corps of stronger fighters protecting his flanks. He moved with the fluid grace of a man who understood combat not as an art form, but as survival, each strike precise and economical. "There!" Gavril shouted above the din, pointing toward a rise where Duke Corbea and his personal guard had retreated to assess the changing battlefield. "The Duke himself!" Andrei nodded grimly. "Keep our people together. Don't let them scatter." Then he began cutting a path directly toward Corbea, driven by the understanding that this conflict would only end when its instigator was confronted. Meanwhile, Irina and her small party had successfully navigated the river approach, slipping through the estate's Watergate with the help of guards who recognized her from previous days. Soaked and shivering, she was rushed immediately to Lady Antonescu, who was directing the defense from the main hall. "Irina," the noblewoman's relief was evident. "We feared you and Andrei had been captured when Corbea's forces arrived at dawn." "We're here," Irina confirmed, extracting the precious document from its waterproof wrapping. "And I bring proof beyond question, the old king's own testimony confirming Andrei's birthright." Lady Antonescu examined the sealed parchment with wonder. "This changes everything. With this, loyal houses who have been hesitating will rally to our cause." She looked up sharply as a messenger burst into the hall. "What news from the gate?" "The common folk have come, my lady," the guard reported breathlessly. "A great force of them, attacking Corbea's rear, and at their head, a man who fights like 10, who the people are calling the Blacksmith King." A smile of fierce pride crossed Irina's face. "Andrei," she said simply. Lady Antonescu's eyes gleamed with renewed determination. "Then we must ensure he has a kingdom to claim when this day is done." She turned to her captain of guards. "Commit our reserves, all of them. The time for caution has passed." Outside, the battle had transformed from a simple siege into chaotic melee. What Corbea's forces possessed in training and equipment, they lost in the confusion of fighting on 2 fronts against an enemy whose numbers seemed to multiply with each passing minute as more villagers arrived, drawn by the spreading word of resistance. Andrei had fought his way to within 50 yards of Duke Corbea's position when a familiar figure cut through the press of battle toward him. Dumitru Corbea, the Duke's brother and enforcer, his face contorted with rage. "Pretender," Dumitru snarled, his sword flashing in a vicious arc that Andrei barely deflected. "Your peasant rebellion ends here." Unlike the common soldiers they had faced thus far, Dumitru was a skilled swordsman trained in the finest fighting schools. His attacks came in fluid combinations that forced Andrei onto the defensive, testing the limits of the blacksmith's self-taught combat style. "I claim only what is rightfully mine," Andrei replied, finding his rhythm as the fight continued. "It is your brother who pretends to a throne he has no right to hold." Their swords clashed again and again, the sound ringing across the battlefield. Gradually, the space around them cleared as both forces recognized the significance of this duel. Even Duke Corbia himself watched from his position on the rise, his expression calculating. In that moment of focused combat, Andrei felt a strange clarity descend, as if his entire life had been preparation for this test. The countless hours at the forge had built not just the physical strength to wield a sword, but the patience to wait for the perfect moment to strike. The years of hunting in the mountains had taught him to read an opponent's intentions from the subtlest shifts in posture and weight. When Dumitru overextended on a thrust, Andrei saw the opening instantly. He sidestepped, letting the blade pass harmlessly, then brought the pommel of his sword down hard on Dumitru's wrist. The nobleman's sword clattered to the frozen ground as he fell to his knees, clutching his injured arm. "Yield," Andrei commanded, his blade at Dumitru's throat. A tense silence fell across the nearest combatants. Then, from the direction of the estate gates, a clear voice rang out. Lady Antonescu herself, flanked by her guards and, to Andrei's profound relief, Irina. "Soldiers of RDL," Lady Antonescu called, her voice carrying remarkable authority for a woman of her years. "Behold your rightful king, Andrei Dragosh, acknowledged son of Petru and grandson of Vladimir the Just. I hold in my hand the sealed testimony of King Vladimir himself, confirming this man's royal blood and right to rule." She unrolled the document, displaying the unbroken royal seal for all to see. A murmur ran through the ranks of Corbia's forces, particularly among the older soldiers who had served under previous kings and recognized the significance of such a claim. Duke Corbia, seeing his advantage slipping away, made his decision. "Kill the pretender," he shouted to his personal guard. "1,000 gold pieces to the man who brings me his head." But his words fell on increasingly unreceptive ears. One by one, soldiers began to lower their weapons, unwilling to fight against what might truly be their legitimate sovereign. The defection began slowly, then spread like wildfire through the ranks. Seeing his support crumbling, Corbea made a desperate gamble. He spurred his horse directly toward Andrei, sword raised for a killing blow. "The throne is mine," he screamed, his composure finally shattered. Andrei met the charge with the steadiness of a man who had faced danger all his life. As Corbea bore down upon him, he waited until the last possible moment before pivoting aside, catching the Duke's arm and using his own momentum to pull him from the saddle. Corbea crashed to the ground with bone-jarring force, his ornate armor clattering against the frozen earth. Before he could recover, Andrei stood over him, sword poised, but not striking. "It's finished, Corbea," Andrei said firmly. "Yield, and you will receive the fair trial that you denied to others." For a moment, it seemed the Duke might accept his defeat. Then his hand moved to his belt, drawing a hidden dagger in one fluid motion as he lunged upward. "Never," he snarled. The attack was fast, but Andrei was faster. His sword flashed once and Corbea fell back, the dagger dropping from suddenly lifeless fingers. Blood stained the pristine snow as the would-be king's life ebbed away. A profound silence settled over the battlefield as Corbea's remaining loyalists threw down their weapons. The villagers, battered but victorious, raised a ragged cheer that was quickly taken up by Lady Antonescu's forces and even some of the surrendered soldiers. As Irina rushed to his side, Andrei stood motionless, the reality of what had just transpired and what lay ahead, settling upon his shoulders like a physical weight. The crown he had never sought was now within his grasp, bought with blood and sacrifice. "It's over," Irina said softly, reaching for his hand. Andrei shook his head, his gaze moving over the battlefield where the wounded were being tended, and the dead laid respectfully aside. "No," he replied, his voice quiet but resolute. "It's just beginning." Snow fell gently over Castle Ardil, transforming its ancient stones and battle-scarred walls into a vision of pristine white. 7 days had passed since the confrontation at Lady Antonescu's estate, 7 days of frantic diplomacy, of summoning noble houses to bear witness, of preparing for the ceremony that would forever change the kingdom's course. In the royal chambers that had once belonged to his father, André stood before a full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the man who stared back at him. Gone were the simple clothes of a village blacksmith, replaced by garments befitting a king, deep blue velvet embroidered with silver thread, a snow-white shirt of finest linen, and boots of supple leather that still felt strange on feet accustomed to sturdy work shoes. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called, expecting another court official with last-minute instructions for the coronation. Instead, Irina stepped into the room, and the sight of her momentarily took his breath away. She too had transformed, her practical traveling clothes replaced by a gown of deep crimson that complemented her chestnut hair, now arranged in an elegant style adorned with simple silver pins. Yet, despite these outward changes, her eyes remained the same, clear, intelligent, and looking at him with an honesty no one else in the castle would dare. "The nobles are assembled in the great hall," she said, approaching him with a smile. "Lady Antonescu sent me to ensure you hadn't escaped through a window." André laughed, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "The thought crossed my mind. I'm more comfortable scaling mountains than navigating court politics." "You've done remarkably well these past days," Irina assured him, straightening his collar with the natural intimacy that had grown between them. "Even Lord Dragomir was impressed by your judgment in the prisoner hearings." "Speaking of which," André said, taking her hands in his, "have you considered my offer?" After the battle, André had granted amnesty to most of Corbeil's forces, recognizing they had simply followed their commander's orders. Only those who had committed specific cruelties under Corbeil's rule awaited judgment. His fair-mindedness had won grudging respect, even from former opponents. Irina's expression grew serious. "I have, and I'm honored, but—" She hesitated. "Are you certain? The position of royal advisor has traditionally gone to seasoned nobles or scholars, not former slaves?" André finished gently. "That tradition ends today. No one knows the true workings of this court better than you, Irina. No one sees more clearly the gap between what nobles say and what they truly intend." He squeezed her hands. "I need your wisdom if I'm to be the king these people deserve." Irina's eyes shimmered with emotion. "Then I accept, Your Majesty." "Don't," he protested automatically. "Not when we're alone. I'm still André to you, always." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with unspoken understanding. So much had changed in the weeks since she had appeared at his forge with an impossible story and a pouch of gold. The journey had transformed them both in ways neither could have imagined. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Lupescu, now formally appointed as commander of the Royal Guard. He bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, it's time." Together they made their way through corridors André was still learning to navigate. Servants and guards bowed as they passed, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope. News of the blacksmith king had spread throughout the kingdom, each retelling adding to the growing legend of a common man who had reclaimed his birthright not through schemes and plots, but through courage and honor. At the entrance to the great hall, Lady Antonescu waited, resplendent in formal attire that reflected her restored position as one of the kingdom's most influential nobles. Beside her stood a surprise visitor, Queen Elisabetta herself, who had emerged from seclusion to witness this historic moment. The elderly queen studied André with piercing eyes. "You have your grandfather's bearing," she observed critically. "Stand straight. Remember that from this day forward, every gesture, every word carries the weight of the kingdom." "I'll remember, Your Majesty," André replied respectfully. The queen's gaze softened slightly. "See that you do. And," she glanced at Irina, "choose your advisors wisely. Some treasures are found in unexpected places. With a nod to Lady Antonescu, the Queen took her position for the procession. Andrei turned to Irina one last time, before they would be separated by the formal requirements of the ceremony. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Her smile was all the answer he needed. The great doors swung open, revealing the largest gathering Castle Ardil had seen in decades. Noble houses from across the kingdom stood in their designated places, their colorful banners hanging from the rafters above. Military commanders, merchants, guild representatives, and, most significantly, common villagers filled the remaining space, an unprecedented inclusion that had raised noble eyebrows, but which Andrei had insisted upon. As Andrei walked slowly down the central aisle, faces turned to study their new king, some curious, some calculating, some openly hopeful. Among them, he recognized figures who had fought alongside him: Gavril the blacksmith, now appointed to lead a newly created citizens' council, village elders who had risked everything to support a cause they believed in, and even his apprentice Mihail, standing wide-eyed beside his mother. Near the front, in a place of honor, sat Lydia of Runk, Andrei's mother. Her illness had prevented her from witnessing the battle, but Lady Antonescu had sent her finest carriage to bring her to the coronation. Tears streamed unashamedly down her face as she watched her son approach the throne that had once seemed an impossible dream. The high priest of Ardil waited before the ancient throne, golden crown resting on a velvet cushion beside him. The ceremony itself was brief but solemn, the traditional words echoing through the hushed hall as Andrei knelt to receive the blessing and the crown. "Rise, Andrei Dragosh, rightful king of Ardil," the priest intoned. "May your reign bring justice and prosperity to all." As Andrei rose and turned to face his subjects, the great hall erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ancient castle. The sound reflected not merely acceptance but genuine hope that this unconventional king might truly understand their struggles and lead with the wisdom his predecessors had lacked. When the clamor finally subsided, Andrei raised his hand to speak. The words he had prepared seemed suddenly inadequate for the moment, and instead, he spoke from his heart. "I stand before you not as a man born to power, but as one who understands its weight and responsibility," he began, his deep voice carrying to the farthest corners of the hall. "I was raised to believe that a person's worth comes not from titles or bloodlines, but from honor, hard work, and compassion for others." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled crowd. "Those values will guide my reign. Ardil will be a kingdom where justice applies equally to noble and commoner alike, where prosperity is measured not by the wealth of a few but by the welfare of all, where the throne exists to serve the people, not to rule over them." Murmurs of approval rippled through the hall, especially among the common folk who had never heard such sentiments from a crowned head before. "I stand here today because of courage shown by many," Andrei continued. "Lady Antonescu, whose wisdom and loyalty never wavered. Captain Lupescu, who remembered his oath, was to the kingdom, not to any single man." His eyes found Gavril and the village representatives. The common people, who risked everything to stand against tyranny. Finally, his gaze settled on Irina, who watched from her place beside Lady Antonescu, her eyes shining with pride. And one woman who believed in justice so deeply that she risked her newfound freedom to fulfill a promise and find a king no one knew existed. The warmth in his voice as he spoke of her was unmistakable. "Today, I name Irina Vasilov as royal advisor, the first of many changes that signal a new era for Ardil." Surprised whispers swept through the noble ranks at this unprecedented appointment, but no one dared object. Not to the man who had led commoners to victory against trained soldiers, who had defeated Corbia in single combat, and who now wore the crown with natural authority that belied his humble origins. As the formal ceremony concluded and the celebration began, Andrei made his way through the crowd, accepting pledges of loyalty and speaking directly with representatives from every segment of society, a king determined to understand all those he would rule. When he finally reached Irina, he took her hand publicly, an action that silenced the nearby conversations. "My first royal decree," he announced loudly enough for those around them to hear. will restore all lands and titles stripped from the Vasilov family 15 years ago, and formally recognize Lady Irina as the last surviving member of that noble house. Irina's shock was genuine. "Andrei, you didn't tell me." "Because you would have refused," he replied with a smile. "You never sought status or recognition, which is precisely why you deserve both." Later, as musicians played and the great hall transformed into a scene of celebration unlike any in living memory, Andrei and Irina slipped away briefly to the quieter space of a castle balcony. Snow continued to fall, muffling the sounds of the kingdom beyond and creating a moment of peace amid the day's pageantry. "Second thoughts?" Irina asked softly, seeing the contemplative look on his face as he gazed out over the snow-covered landscape. "No," Andrei replied with certainty. "But I am thinking of that night at the forge. How different the world seemed then. How impossible this future would have appeared." He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. 100 gold coins, he mused. "That's what my father gave you to run away to save yourself." "The best investment he ever made," Irina replied with a smile, though not in the way he intended. "I have a different investment to propose," Andrei said, suddenly serious. "Not gold, but my heart, my life, my future." He drew a deep breath. "Our deal needs a queen who understands both struggle and compassion. I need a partner who sees me as Andrei, not just as a king." Understanding dawned in Irina's eyes, emotion rendering her momentarily speechless. "The kingdom might disapprove," Andrei continued, "of their king marrying a woman once enslaved within these very walls. But let them disapprove. Some traditions are meant to be broken, especially those built on cruelty and prejudice." "Are you certain?" Irina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are noble women, political alliances that would strengthen your position." "I am king," Andrei interrupted gently, "but that is merely what I do, not who I am. And Andrei Vlad, blacksmith of Runk, loves Irina Vasilov with a devotion that no crown or duty could ever diminish." He smiled, his eyes filled with tenderness. "So I ask you, not as king to subject, but as man to woman, will you stand beside me, not just as advisor, but as wife and queen?" Irina's answer was not in words but in the kiss she gave him, a kiss that held all the promise of spring after the longest winter, of healing after pain, of love born from the most unlikely circumstances. Inside the great hall, the celebration continued, nobles and commoners alike raising toasts to their new king. Outside, snow blanketed the kingdom in pristine white, covering the scars of battle and conflict, offering our deal what it needed most: a clean page upon which to write a new chapter of its history. A chapter that had begun with a dying king's remorse, 100 gold coins, and a former slave who chose not to run, but to change the world instead.